My crush ghosted me in college, then showed up at our family dinner engaged to my sister. She stood in front of the entire family, holding out her left hand with that smug little smile she wore every time she thought she had won. There was the ring. Diamond, tasteful, expensive. And there was the announcement. We're engaged. She said it like she had rehearsed it, like the moment belonged to her and always had. Everyone clapped. My mom teared up. My dad placed a hand over his chest like he was watching a Hallmark moment unfold. But I just sat there, frozen, staring at the man beside her. That man used to be mine. At least, he was for a moment. A moment no one else knew about. This wasn't some shallow crush I held onto from high school. I met Ethan 6 years ago during a summer internship in Chicago. We were both 21, fresh out of college, pretending to be adults while eating gas station sandwiches at midnight and falling asleep on textbooks. We weren't official, not in any defined way. But we were something. We kissed. We held hands on the train. We spent weekends wandering bookstores and talking about where we wanted to live one day. Then one morning, it all stopped. No message. No call. Just silence. He vanished, and I was too hurt to chase answers. I figured he lost interest. I figured I imagined it all. And I told no one. Especially not Mia, my younger sister, who had a long history of turning my leftovers into her milestones. And now here she was, showing off a perfect ring, locked arm in arm with the man I used to dream about. She looked like the ending of a romantic movie. And I was supposed to be clapping. I smiled the way people do when they're trying not to break their own teeth from clenching too hard. I stayed seated while the room buzzed with congratulations. Then I slipped out onto the front porch. The air was cool and still. The kind of silence you only get in the space between shock and fury. I gripped the railing and stared at the street. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter anymore. That I was over Ethan. That it had been years. But my chest told another story. My body remembered something my brain had spent a long time burying. I didn't hear her come out until I caught her reflection in the window beside me. "You okay?" she asked. Her voice was sweet, concerned, completely fake. "I'm fine," I said. She stepped closer, just enough to make her presence known. She sipped from her champagne glass, then said, "I always kind of knew you liked him. Back then. That summer." I turned my head slowly. "What?" "You talked about him all the time," she said with a shrug. "It wasn't hard to tell. You knew." My voice was flat. "Well, you never said anything out loud. So I figured it wasn't serious. And you weren't dating, right?" I stared at her, my hands gripping the railing so tight I thought the wood might crack. "He didn't seem that into you," she added. "He reached out to me first, just so you know." That was the moment everything locked into place. She hadn't stumbled into this relationship by chance. She had known. She saw it. And she took it anyway. Mia didn't just steal a crush. She made sure it was someone I loved. Because to her, love was a competition. And I had just lost the final round. I didn't say anything else to her on the porch. What could I say that would land in the right place? She had made her move. The ring on her finger wasn't just about love. It was a trophy. A quiet, glittering reminder that she always got what she wanted, even if it wasn't hers to take. Dinner carried on inside like nothing was wrong. The clinking of glasses, silverware scraping across plates, bursts of laughter. It all felt distant, like I was watching a scene I didn't belong in anymore. I eventually walked back in and took my seat, my face calm, my thoughts screaming. Ethan sat beside her at the head of the table, charming as ever. He looked more polished than I remembered. Slightly broader in the shoulders, cleaner cut. His eyes didn't scan the room for me. If there was any recognition, he didn't show it. I tried to look for signs. A glance. A flicker of guilt. But he kept his hand on Mia's leg under the table and smiled at her like she was the only person in the world. For a second I doubted myself. Maybe he never remembered me. Maybe it really was nothing, just a summer flirtation I had mistaken for something more. But that didn't explain how suddenly he stopped texting me. It didn't explain how fast Mia swooped in. It didn't explain the way she looked at me just now, like she had taken a bite out of something that was mine. I pushed my food around my plate and waited for the night to be over. After dessert, people began to say their goodbyes. Mom took Mia aside, dabbing her eyes and saying something about how proud she was. Dad hugged Ethan like he had just welcomed royalty into the family. I stayed behind, helping clear the dishes, needing something to do with my hands. As I stood at the sink rinsing plates, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. I was hoping we'd get a second to talk, Ethan said quietly. My chest tightened. I placed the plate on the rack and finally turned. About what? I asked. He looked over his shoulder to make sure we were alone. You look good. I stared at him, stone-faced. I wasn't sure you'd be here tonight, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. It's my family. Right, he said. I mean, it's been a while. You disappeared. He nodded slowly. I know. I didn't handle things well. That's one way to put it. I wanted to explain back then, he said, voice low. But it just got messy. You ghosted me. I didn't think it was serious, he said quickly. You and we had fun, but you never said anything about being exclusive. And then Mia reached out, and it just happened. Mia reached out? I asked, eyebrows raised. He hesitated. No, I said. You told her you reached out to her first. She said that. Yes. He looked away, jaw tight. That was the moment I knew something was off. One of them was lying. Or maybe both. Either way, they had rewritten the story to make themselves feel better. Look, he said, suddenly defensive. I care about her. We're engaged now. That's all that matters. I wiped my hands on a towel and took a deep breath. No, I said. What matters is that you both played pretend with other people's feelings. And you think it's love. His mouth opened like he wanted to say more, but I walked past him before he could. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from our conversation at the sink. The way Ethan looked nervous. The hesitation when I brought up who reached out to who. The way his voice shifted when I stopped letting him lead the story. He was lying. Maybe not outright. Maybe not the kind of lie that's easy to point to. But something in him knew he had done me wrong. And Mia? She had known the truth for years and still stood there grinning like she'd won a prize instead of stolen one. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my mom while she drank her tea and looked through bridal magazines like nothing had happened. She's so happy, she said, smiling at a page covered in lace gowns. Mia always said she wanted a spring wedding. Think we can pull it off in 3 months? I'm not really involved in planning, I said, staring into my coffee. She wants you to be maid of honor, Mom said, looking up. I blinked. She told me last night. Said she always imagined it would be you. The two of you used to talk about it when you were kids. I laughed under my breath, bitter and quiet. What's funny? Nothing. Just memories. She tilted her head. You okay? I'm fine. Mom paused, watching me a little too closely. You know, I was surprised you didn't seem more excited. This is a big moment for your sister. She's had a lot of big moments. Is something going on between you two? I shook my head and got up from the table. No. Just tired. I walked out before she could press further. I wasn't ready to drag this into the light. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as the week went on, something started to eat at me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the lie being celebrated. The entire family had wrapped themselves in this shiny narrative Mia created, and no one saw how much of it was built on silence. My silence. I had let her do it. I had made it easy. She had taken Ethan knowing exactly what he had meant to me. And he had let her do it, probably relieved that I never said a word. Maybe they both thought I had forgotten. Maybe they thought I was too ashamed to bring it up. And for a long time, they were right. But now they were planning a wedding. Toasts. Vows. A photo album that started with a lie and would be passed down through generations like it was some beautiful beginning. One night, a few days before the engagement party, Mia texted me. Mia, hey, I know things have been weird. Can we talk? Me, about what? Mia, I want to clear the air. I feel like you're mad. Me, I'm not mad. I'm just not fake. She didn't reply right away. Then another message came through. Mia, if this is about Ethan, it was a long time ago. I didn't steal anything. He chose me. I stared at that message for a long time. He chose her. That was her truth. And maybe it was Ethan's too. But I had my own version. And I was starting to feel like maybe it was time to let everyone hear it. I didn't reply to Mia's last message. I couldn't. The words sat there like a slap I was expected to accept. He chose me. That wasn't an olive branch. That was a victory lap. The next few days were filled with group messages about the engagement party. Dress colors, catering options, venue pictures. Mia added me to every thread. I stayed silent in all of them. She kept pretending nothing was wrong, and I kept pretending she didn't exist. That felt like the only balance we had left. By the time the party arrived, I had already decided I wouldn't speak. I wasn't going to ruin her day. I wasn't going to drag everything out in front of guests. But I also wasn't going to play happy sister. I would show up, smile where I needed to, then disappear the moment it was acceptable to leave. The party was held at our parents' house. Strings of lights in the backyard, a rented white tent, tables dressed in champagne-colored linens. Everything looked perfect. Mia always knew how to put together a moment. Ethan stood near the drinks table, shaking hands with my uncles like he belonged there. Mia floated between guests in a pale pink dress, hugging people and laughing loudly enough for everyone to hear. She looked like the girl she always wanted to be. Center of attention, perfectly polished, untouched by guilt. I stood near the edge of the tent, sipping ginger ale and trying not to vomit. At one point, our cousin Tasha came up beside me. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just taking it all in." She glanced toward Ethan and Mia. "Crazy how fast it happened, right? I didn't even know they were dating." "Neither did I said and took another sip. She gave me a look, not quite confused, not quite surprised. More like she sensed something she didn't want to touch. "You two used to be close," she said, nodding toward Mia. "Used to?" Tasha hesitated, then leaned in. "If something's going on, you can tell me." I smiled politely. "Thanks, but I'm fine." That was a lie. I was the furthest thing from fine. After the cake cutting, Mia got on the mic to give a little speech. She thanked everyone for coming, told a cute story about how Ethan, accidentally, brought her the wrong coffee on their second date, and then ended with a line that made my chest lock up. Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it. Sometimes it's standing right in front of you the whole time, and you just have to be brave enough to reach for it. The crowd clapped. She looked at Ethan like he was her prize. I looked at my hands. I left the tent and walked toward the side of the house. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I felt numb, the kind of numb that comes from realizing no one else is going to tell the truth unless you do. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote everything down. Not a rant. Not some messy explosion of emotion. Just the facts. Dates. Screenshots. Memories. My side of the story, finally laid out in black and white. Then I opened the family group chat. I didn't post it yet. But I hovered over the message box for a long time, my heart racing, my hands cold. Because deep down, I knew the second I hit send, there would be no going back. I didn't send the message that night. I sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard, reading the text I had written over and over. It was honest. Clear. Not cruel, just raw. But I kept asking myself the same question. Was I doing this to set the record straight, or was I doing it to hurt her? Maybe it was both. And maybe that was the part that scared me. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a walk. The air was still cool, and the streets were quiet. That was the only time I could think clearly. No noise. No fake smiles. Just me and the sound of my shoes on the pavement. I walked past the park where Mia and I used to play when we were kids. Swings creaking in the wind, the same old oak tree we used to carve our names into. I stood there for a minute, staring at those faint initials. Back then, we were inseparable. She used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. We shared everything, even secrets. I thought we'd always be close. I didn't know back then that some people grow up craving attention more than connection. That night, we had a family dinner. Casual, just pizza and wine, everyone laughing like the party had wiped the slate clean. Mia was glowing. Ethan sat beside her, his hand resting on her back like it belonged there. I sat across from them, chewing slowly, trying not to let my eyes burn. At one point, Mia raised her glass. To family, she said, looking right at me. I clinked my glass with hers, forcing a smile. To honesty, I said. She paused, then laughed a little too loudly. Ethan chuckled along with her, but I noticed the way his eyes flicked down toward the table. Later, when everyone else had moved into the living room, I stayed behind in the kitchen. I thought I was alone until I heard Ethan's voice behind me. I read it. I turned. He stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets. The message. The draft. Mia saw it open on your laptop. She showed me. I said nothing. My heart felt like it had stopped mid-beat. She was upset, he added. Said you were trying to ruin everything. I leaned against the counter. Was I wrong? He hesitated. No. But timing matters. No, I said quietly. Truth matters. He looked down at his shoes. We weren't good people back then. I was immature. She was persistent. She lied, I said. She knew I liked you. She knew what you and I had. He nodded. I didn't think you'd care. I thought you were over it. You ghosted me. I panicked. You were intense and I wasn't ready. And then you went to my sister. I didn't plan it, he said. But it happened. I stepped forward. And now you're marrying her. He looked at me with a kind of tired regret. It's too late to undo things. You telling the family now, it won't change anything. It'll just burn everything down. I stared at him, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not the charming guy I once fell for. Not the polished fiancé. Just a man who took the easy way out every time. I think it's already burning, I said. He didn't argue. I walked out of the kitchen and straight past Mia, who was laughing at something on her phone. I went to my room, opened my laptop, and stared at the message again. Then I pressed send. His message went out at 9:42 p.m. By 9:46, the group chat exploded. It started with my aunt typing, "Wait, what is this?" followed by my cousin dropping the wide eyes emoji. Then came my mom's message, short and loaded, "Is this true?" And finally, Mia's reply. Mia, are you serious right now? Mia, you're making this about you. Mia, you've had years to say something, and now you picked this moment. I didn't respond. I just watched the typing dots come and go, the panic unraveling behind each sentence. The screenshots I sent included photos from the summer Ethan and I spent together. Pictures from the internship office, selfies outside the museum, a text he sent that said, "I don't know what this is yet, but I like being around you." I had included dates. I had laid out a timeline. And I had ended the message with one line, "I kept quiet for a long time, but I won't pretend this story didn't begin with a lie." My phone started ringing almost immediately. I let it buzz. I didn't want to hear voices. I wanted silence. I put the phone face down on my nightstand, turned off the light, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Part of me expected to feel regret. Like maybe I had gone too far. But the longer I lay there, the clearer I felt. I hadn't done this out of jealousy. I had done it because no one else was ever going to say it. And I was tired of swallowing my own history to keep someone else's version intact. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from my mom. You need to call me. This is getting out of hand. I sat on the edge of the bed for a minute, thinking. Then I walked to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat down with my phone. Another message came in. This one from Ethan. Ethan, we should talk. I stared at it for a long time. He wasn't wrong. We probably should. But I didn't want another apology that would circle back to "it just happened." I didn't want him to smooth it over. I wanted him to feel the weight of what had been brushed aside for years. I texted back one word, "Why?" He didn't reply. By noon, my mom showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, standing there with a tight jaw and a grocery bag like she could bribe me into a conversation with muffins. I opened the door and she walked in without waiting for an invitation. "You should have come to me first," she said as she set the bag on the counter. I didn't think anyone would listen. She turned to face me. "That's not fair." "What part of this is fair?" I asked. That I was supposed to keep pretending like nothing happened. Like she didn't take something from me and lie about it for years. "She's your sister." "Exactly," I said. "And that used to mean something." She looked at me for a long time before speaking again. "You've put her in a really hard position. This could ruin her relationship." She did that. I just stopped protecting her from it. My mom sat down at the kitchen table and sighed. "I don't know what you expect to come from all this." "I don't expect anything," I said. "I just wanted the truth to finally exist in the same room as the people pretending to live in it." My mom didn't say much after that. She sat at the table, picking at the corner of a napkin like she could fold this situation into something tidy. Eventually, she stood up, told me she loved me, and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving only the sound of my refrigerator humming in the background. The silence was louder than anything. I didn't hear from Mia that day. Not directly. But I got the echoes. A friend sent me a screenshot of her Instagram story, just a photo of her hand holding the ring, captioned, "Not everyone wants to see you happy. Do it anyway." The comments were full of hearts and clapping emojis. Only a few people knew what it was really about. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I didn't text her. By the end of the week, the family group chat had gone cold. No one wanted to touch it. The energy shifted. The usual chatter about birthdays or Sunday dinner vanished. My uncle quietly removed himself from the chat altogether. My cousin sent me a private message saying she always thought something seemed off between Mia and Ethan, but she didn't want to stir the pot. That was the thing about truth. Once you put it out there, people either face it or pretend it never landed. On Saturday morning, I got a knock at my door. It was Ethan. I opened it slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a mess, like the engagement had aged him 10 years in a week. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit down. Just stood in the middle of my apartment, arms crossed, eyes darting everywhere but my face. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I just want to be honest." "Go ahead." He took a breath. "I knew it would hurt you. Back then. When I stopped talking to you. When I started seeing Mia. I knew." "Then why?" "Because it was easier," he said. "You and I had something real. But it scared me. You saw parts of me no one else did." Mia never asked the hard questions. With her, it was simple. "That's not love," I said. "I know," he whispered. "But I wanted it to be." I watched him for a moment. This wasn't the man who ghosted me. This wasn't the version Mia had painted in her storybook romance. This was someone standing in the rubble, finally seeing the pieces. "She thinks I cheated on her," he said. "She asked me last night if anything happened between us since the engagement." I shook my head. "It didn't. But you did lie. You let her rewrite the story. And you went along with it." He nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry." I waited for the usual follow-up. The justification. The excuse. But it didn't come. "I didn't come here to ask you to take it back," he added. I just needed to say it out loud. That I hurt you. That I chose comfort over character. And I've been living with that choice ever since. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight in my chest start to shift. You're not the only one who's been carrying it, I said. We stood in silence for a while. Then he left. And I realized maybe the truth didn't fix anything. But it finally set something down that I had carried long enough. Mia finally reached out 3 days later. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full sentence. Just one text. Mia, I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood that I didn't owe her anything. Not a reply. Not forgiveness. Not my silence. For years, I had given her space in my life that she didn't earn. She took what she wanted, rewrote the past, and counted on me to keep the peace. I used to believe keeping quiet was the mature thing. That letting her have her version of things was the price of being the bigger person. But staying silent doesn't make you noble. It just gives people like her more room to lie. I didn't respond. A week passed. The group chat remained quiet. Some people reached out privately to say they were sorry I had gone through that. Others stayed silent, choosing not to pick sides. And that was fine. This wasn't about forcing anyone to believe me. It was about finally refusing to disappear from my own story. I went back to work, back to my routines, and started sleeping through the night again. Something about telling the truth, even in a messy way, gave me back a piece of myself I had forgotten I lost. One afternoon, I got a call from my cousin Tasha. She asked if I wanted to meet up for coffee. I almost said no. I wasn't in the mood to rehash everything again. But something in her voice sounded different. Not nosy. Not curious. Just kind. So I met her. She slid into the booth across from me and didn't start with a question. I always knew something was off between you and Mia, she said. You used to light up when you talked about Ethan. And then one day, you just stopped. I looked at her, surprised. You noticed that? Everyone noticed. But Mia's always been persuasive. Loud enough to drown out the truth. I nodded slowly. I let her. Not anymore, she said. We sipped our drinks in silence for a while before she added, you were right to say something. It was the first time someone had said that out loud. And it landed with more weight than I expected. I walked home that day feeling lighter. Not because things had magically worked out. Not because I got closure. But because I had finally chosen myself. Mia and Ethan never officially canceled the engagement, but I noticed she stopped posting about it. The ring disappeared from her photos. His name stopped showing up altogether. I don't know if they're still together. I don't care. That part of the story doesn't belong to me anymore. What does belong to me is my voice. My truth. My ability to speak even when it's uncomfortable. I had spent years shrinking to make space for other people's happiness. I was done doing that. Sometimes love looks like choosing silence. But sometimes, real love, the kind you show yourself, looks like finally telling the story no one wanted to hear. And letting go of the people who only loved you when you stayed quiet.